Anne Marie, it's been a while since we've had one of these discussions about COVID. The sad news is that we're having this discussion again. The
Right.
numbers compared to the last time we met are alarming.
Absolutely. We have just seen a really massive leap in cases. Not that they weren't expecting that, but it's hard to see it.
No secret that the Omicron variant spreads much easier, and I think that's why we're seeing the big rise in numbers. How about the severity? Deaths, hospitalizations compared to the Delta variant and the original COVID?
The good thing is that it is not as severe. So the majority of people who are getting it are having mild symptoms. We're talking cold-like symptoms, stuffiness, maybe a headache. Some people have what we say typical symptoms such as fevers, muscle aches, loss of taste and smell. Those tend to be people who have not had COVID at all. But unfortunately, we are seeing it with people who are vaccinated and boosted, but they tend to have those mild cases. They think it's just a cold, but then they find out that they were exposed to someone, test, and they're positive.
I'm going to take you back to your days of nursing school and maybe one of the questions you had on an exam. Is it unusual for variants as they progress to get weaker? Because this seems, although it spreads more, doesn't do as much harm.
A lot depends on the mechanism. Most of the changes in variants, it depends on the amount that they shift. So if you have just a mild change, it tends not to be a mild disease. It tends to be a mild disease. So for instance, when you look at flu, we have shifts and variants with that frequently, fairly frequently, which is why you have to get that flu vaccination every year because there's slight changes. If you remember back quite a while now when H1N1 came, that was a major shift. And so that was a whole new vaccine, and it was more severe at that time because it was so different and people didn't have any kind of antibody or resistance to it. What we're seeing now with the Omicron, it's a change, so we don't have antibody total protection against it, but we do have some resistance, so our symptoms are milder.
I know you have numbers for the month of December, very high. Probably not a surprise with what we're seeing.
It's not a surprise, but it's still challenging. So we had 851 cases in December. We thought last December was challenging with numbers that were in the 500s. There's a lot of challenges when you get cases that high. That's only the reported cases, those who go through official testing, lab reported, that come through the state. We know that there's probably, I wouldn't hesitate to say probably that many more that are home with because of home tests. So the case numbers are much higher.
Someone comes home, they're running a temperature, they have a headache, they take one of the at-home tests, says they don't have COVID, they wake up the next day, they feel fine, the temperature's gone. Do they go to work? I mean, what do you do in a case like that?
Well, it's really, it's an issue right now because we're in the midst of flu season. There is flu, there are colds. What we're finding is the tests are pretty good, but sometimes people are testing too soon. So there's not enough proteins or viruses for the test to show that. That's why actually when people really read through the home tests, they say to test twice. Most people don't. They test once and then they never do a second test. And that's because they know that the first one might not catch that it's COVID, and then they're supposed to test, a few days after that. A lot depends on the severity of symptoms. If they have cold-like symptoms, yeah, I understand. That's where the challenge is coming. People have a cold, they test, it's negative, they go to work, and then they start to feel worse. Days later, they test again and it's positive, and that's part of why we're seeing the spread that we're seeing. People need to wear masks. They need to distance. It's taking precautions that you can, common sense as best that you can. Really, should people be coming to work with colds? But I also...
That's an age-old question.
That's always been a challenge, right? Because nobody wants someone else's cold, but people feel if they don't have sick time, we know that there's financial pressures, but that's the quandary that we're in. I'd say stay home and then retest a couple of days later.
Nothing personal, but hopefully we won't need to see you again for a while.
Thank you.